Good evening, everyone. I should be live at the moment. Do give me a 1 in the chat, please, if you can hear me and everything is working well with the audio. Yes, I think we're fine. So, so welcome to all those who are here. Thank you for waiting and thank you for being here. So I've got Villainous, Yaya. He never returned as a horse, and you said thank you, Lloyd, for the series. Being a former agnostic, I know the evil of communism and socialism, but I never questioned atheism. You have forced me to go down the rabbit hole. And thank you, Villainous, for the one. And Thaddeus was live on YouTube for over 12 hours straight, two streams. Yeah, yeah. I cannot be yeah, involved in things like that. It's to listen to listen to that much waffle for that long from such ignorant people or just propagandists is beyond me. Villainous. No, I want to live. Okay, so yeah, I'm just gonna keep this relatively short. Within reasonable bounds. Less than 6 months. You know. Um, yeah, yeah. He never returned his horse. I spoke to him about that. I think he has too much patience. I mean, letting people run wild and just spout their garbage for several minutes at a time and just let them repeat themselves. It's just beyond me. I don't have that kind of patience. I mean, we are here to spread our message, not to let them run wild and promote their propaganda. So yeah, today, obviously I'm going on to the next part. I did invite Thunderous, but unfortunately at the last minute he had to cancel. So I was going to do this with him, but so I'll try and do another stream with him later this week. Now, so I'm going to go back a couple of slides. Hello there, Laser Darkness 19 Gaming and Dodzod, welcome. So I'm going to go back a couple of slides just to refresh where we were, and we'll be talking about the definitions of atheism. Now, I believe we've made clear in the previous episodes that atheists are adamant in denying the fact that atheism is an active rejection, an active denial of Christianity, and also seem to be ignorant, or if they are not ignorant, they are simply in denial about it or deliberately in denial about it, that atheism began as an ideology that specifically and actively attempted to end Christianity and replace it with an atheistic worldview, which had its own doctrine, which effectively was copied from within the church doctrines, but seeked to remove everything of the divine and promote their idea of the world minus the divine. So back to the Random House Encyclopedia, and I'm pretty sure if I dug deeper into the Random House Encyclopedia, we would find more. And this says that atheism is a system of thought developed around the denial of God's existence. Now remember, I've got here nearly 60 sources. I've got plus 50 sources, all of them academic, all of the major sources. Most of them are atheist sources written by atheist academics, which all of them, 99% of them, literally define atheism specifically as an active rejection, a denial, a doctrine, a belief, a worldview, a set of principles that teaches a specific view of the world minus the theist, well, minus the divine. So it's a complete belief system, a replacement belief system for Christianity. However, lay atheists deny this through and through. Now, here's the thing. We know that Richard Dawkins, for instance, who's written long screeds and has gone on huge book tours and talking events and so on, he seems to not know that atheism is merely just a lack of belief. He seems to have a very detailed set of beliefs he wants to push on you. Take a look at the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Of atheism. So you've got Daniel Dennett, you've got Sham Harris. All of them very specifically happen to have beliefs. They all don't seem to just have a lack of belief. They have a series of very detailed beliefs that they want to push on you. Why don't these very famous men that atheists turn to as their prophets, why don't these major atheists know that atheism is merely a lack of belief? Well, simply this is so that atheists can deny any culpability for any of the atrocities, for any of the issues with atheism. They are simply not responsible because there's no ideology. It's simply a way of giving them an escape, a scapegoat. It's giving them an out. So the pop definitions are like takia. Exactly, Villainous. I would have to agree with you. The pop definitions are very much like takia. Atheists will, and just like Abdul's, they have exactly the same evasions and the same arguments. So we now know that atheism is a system of thought. It is developed around the denial of God's existence. Atheism, so defined, first appeared during the Enlightenment, the quote-unquote age of reason. Here they were going to have reason, but reason defined the way that atheists defined it. Reason of a particular type. And this was going to replace religious thought, which they said was no different to what Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Engels, and the major prophets of communism were stating. Reason is simply a replacement for religion, which religion being, of course, mythical, religion being superstition, religion being false, right? So they are pushing this idea, which is exactly the same idea that the communists were pushing. Now, let's continue. The Oxford Companion to Philosophy. Atheism is the doctrine that there is no God. Some atheists support this claim by arguments. Some atheists, notice, and this is true, most atheists will simply have their little talking points. Others simply refuse to discuss with you, don't want to provide evidence because they have no belief. They're like a little baby. And yes, that's exactly the level of thinking that's gone into this. But these arguments are usually directed against the Christian concept of God and are largely irrelevant to other gods. That's the Oxford Companion to Philosophy, 1995 version. So, yeah, why would I want to say that the Oxford Companion to Philosophy is wrong? Well, it's the same way that Abduls will claim that every single Islamic text is wrong, only their interpretation is valid. So, again, it's just denial, denial, deny everything. Next, again, this is the atheist that came up with the definition, supposedly the earliest functional definition, that atheism is merely a lack of belief, right? The Baron de Holbach. Now, of course, if this man simply felt that atheism was just a lack of belief, why did he have this to say? Religion has ever filled the mind of man with darkness and kept him in ignorance of the real duties of true interests. Of course, that would be self-interest, man looking after his own personal selfish interests. It is only by dispelling these clouds and the phantoms of religion. That's what Marx said, that's what Engels said, that's what Stalin said, that's what Lenin said, that's what modern humanists say. That's what modern atheists say. They repeat the very same things. That we shall discover truth. So in other words, religion is the thing that prevents man from seeing the truth. Marx wrote at length on this, and I've covered this before. So religion prevents you from discovering truth, reason, and morality. They are specifically here talking about Christian religion. Religion diverts us from the causes of evil and from the remedies which nature prescribes. Far from curing it, it only aggravates, multiplies, and perpetuates them. So religion is the source of evil. As Sam Harris has said, religion is the source of all violence. And so this is simply modern atheists are paraphrasing these ideas. And of course, this is the guy that came up with atheism is a lack of belief. And I'll probably cover that again. I have shown that before. So for a man who believes that atheism is a lack of belief, he certainly had some very interesting things to say against religion. Is that a big tea bag he has? Yes, I think it's a used tea bag he has on his head. Voltaire again. The hatred of religion by not a few well-known philosophers and many of their followers is clearly manifested, among others, in the above-mentioned quote of Baron de Holbach, not to mention the well-known statement of Voltaire. Every sensible man, every honorable man, must hold the Christian religion in horror. Got this quote from this website, the Institute of World Politics. And of course, this enlightenment that they are speaking of, right, which will replace Christianity with this new kind of reasoned thinking, was spread among educated classes by the many societies of thought that were founded at that time. And amongst those, according to Encyclopaedia Britannica, these ideas were spread via Masonic lodges. Interesting that Masonic lodges were spreading anti-Christian ideas, if Masons are simply just neutral arbiters of knowledge. Agricultural societies and reading rooms. Of course, Marx wrote his books in reading rooms, the British Library reading room. JT Casewald, I'm really pleased with this work. Thank you very much. Now, let me continue. So, of course, we've mentioned that Voltaire, who was supposedly a deist, okay, and of course, we know that Voltaire was actually an atheist because he said as much. He stated, in 20 years, Christianity will be no more. My hand shall destroy the edifice it took 12 apostles to rear. And then he said that in 50 years, no one would remember Christianity. This was Voltaire. So again, for an atheist who has just a mere lack of belief, just a lack of interest in other ideas, just no beliefs at all, it's very interesting that he very specifically wants to destroy Christian beliefs. So modern atheism was developed as an anti-Christian belief system designed to replace Christianity with what they felt was a superior scientific form of Christianity, if you will. So, of course, Voltaire, his books, of course, were selling for mere cents around that time. And, of course, Christianity is still around today. Of course, Christianity is also very much under assault today. So now, next, atheism. Is there a doctrine in the house? Let's have a look at these three resources. Merriam-Webster, since 1828, the Cambridge Dictionary, and also dictionary.com. Atheism is a principle or position, or the body of principles in a branch of knowledge, or a system of belief. Very interesting. Atheism is a principle, or a position, or the body of principles, or the ideas in a branch of knowledge, or the ideas in a system of belief. Why does it not say, why are we finding literally not a single academic source that has a primary definition that says atheism is merely a lack of belief? It's just dogma, right? Dogma is things that you must believe that are considered true, that are not to be questioned, right? And they mention here Catholic doctrine. The church has doctrine. Here they've got Christian doctrine. The church has doctrine. The church has beliefs, ideas, principles, books, whole chapters and paragraphs used to describe certain ideas. Atheism is described the same way, a belief or set of beliefs, especially political or religious, taught and accepted by a particular group. Now, atheists, as we know, are all painted with the same stripe. They're all painted with the same colors. They all say the same things. They all push the same narrative because they all have the same beliefs. And also, atheism did start as a socio-political movement, which was a pseudo-religion. They had to redefine what a religion was to become a religion. Don't forget, in the United States, atheism is legally a religion. Atheists went to the Supreme Court to argue to be accepted as religion by redefining the word religion, right? Just as marriage was redefined. Yeah, thank you very, very much. I really am grateful. Thank you for that. Yeah, I had an atheist saying, agnostic is lack of knowledge and atheism is lack of belief. But thankfully I was able to get him busted for having a clear position in doctrine of denial. That is fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad this was helpful information for you. I'm so really, really happy. Yes, they do have a clear set of beliefs. Right? Now, let's look at dictionary.com. A particular principle, a position. Atheists want to imply and state they don't have a position. They have no idea. Right? Or policy taught or advocated as of a religion or government. Catholic doctrines. Again, this brings up the idea of Catholic. So it's like a church. It is a religious system. Now, whether it matches our idea of religion, it functions as a religion. It's functionally. So you can call it a fake religion, certainly, and I'll accept that because they redefined religion into what they called a functional set of beliefs rather than a substantive set of beliefs. So previously you had substantive religion in the substantive sense, which was a belief in God and following those principles given to you by the divine lawgiver and following that moral system. Whereas they said religion functions in a way that it produces social harmony, it provides rules for living, and they said, well, atheism does the same thing. It operates according to the functional belief set. Now, sadly, again, and I have found a couple of more references to this. I'm still busy building that, but again, this goes back to Martin Luther. With his changes that he introduced, he seemed to have opened the door to people to redefining what religion is, because Martin Luther stopped looking at who God was. And he started to say, what does God do? And so therefore you switch from the substantive belief in God to the functional idea of God and religion. And this is what atheists have now glommed onto. So there seems to be a connection there. Okay, so sadly, this again goes back to Martin Luther opening that anyone can decide what religion is for them, right? So notice, we've spoken about this, belief or set of beliefs. And as I said, atheism started as a socio-political cause. Right, and it has this religious component, which is not very different to Islam, a socio-political cause, right? A political / socio-political cause with religious overtones. Socialism is again identical to that, socio-political cause with religious camouflage. Right? Is the atheist dogma fluid or rigid like Akida? It seems to have consistent. So Simple Jack, it seems to have very consistent ideas. It's anti-Christian specifically. It's not particularly like you get anti-Buddhist atheists. It's really specifically anti-Christian. the dogma seems to stem from the Enlightenment thinkers, and also prior to them. I haven't gone much beyond the 1750s. Let's say I've only gone up to about the late 1700s. Let's just say that's where I focused at this point, and I haven't gone into depth on the writings of these actual Enlightenment thinkers, but they were profoundly anti-Christian, profoundly anti-church, and they were revolutionary. They also called for revolution, right? But it's fluid in the sense that just like Abduls will just make up their own beliefs on the fly, this is exactly. But again, neo-Marxism is just is an extension of and a reinterpretation of Marxist ideas to fit a new approach. So yeah, it's got that flexibility to it as well, but it's still within the bounds of a certain ideological frame. It still works within that frame. I hope that gives you an answer. BB, thank you very much. Okay, right. Now notice it states here, also with dictionary.com, something that is taught, teachings collectively, religious doctrine. So atheism, as I said in the United States, is religious doctrine. Okay, so now the online etymology dictionary, looking up the word atheism. So atheism, okay, a word forming element making nouns implying a practice. So an ism, this ism here, refers to a word forming element that makes nouns implying a practice, a system, a doctrine. So if atheism is an ism, that means it is a practice, a system, or a doctrine. And notice here within the etymology dictionary, atheism is the doctrine that there is no God, disbelief in any regularity in the universe to which man must conform himself under penalties. Now, this doesn't mean a lack of belief. This means an active disbelief. I don't believe you. Right? This is an active rejection. That's a verb. Right? So notice it goes back to the 1580s to the French atheisme, right? However that is pronounced. And without a God, notice atheos, without a God. Now people will often, and in fact mostly, refer to without a God. However, look at this here, denying the gods, right? So forming words for religious concepts. Another important point we must bear in mind is that atheism is irrelevant if there has not been theism prior to it. Atheism is a reaction to, it is the opposite of, it is the, what's the word? It is the negation of, the rejection of theism, right? It is the opposite of. Now, no, atheists are going to play word games all the time. It's simply just these word games, these sophist word games that they will play. But you cannot have atheism if you can't have veganism in the absence of people eating meat. Veganism is I reject eating of meat, right? So you can't have something that is against something if that other thing didn't exist first. So atheism cannot be the default position, right? Because atheism is a reaction to, it is the contradictory of something else. So it only exists in relation to theism. It is the opposite position of theism. It is the negative position of theism. So in late 19th century, it is sometimes further distinguished into secondary senses, the denial of theism. That is, of the doctrine that the great first cause is a supreme, intelligent, righteous person, because atheists are by definition materialists. They don't believe in anything beyond the five senses. Man is the measure of all things. They don't believe in anything that is spiritual, non-material. So therefore, it is a denial of theism. It's a denial of anything that is spiritual. Let's see. He never returns. There's apparently little passivity in the religion of atheism. There is little passivity. Yeah, there are a few atheists that maybe but really just agnostics. But yeah, yeah, they are even more sloppy than the Islamists. That is so true. Right. So notice, yeah. So it is the denial that there is a great first cause in an intelligent, righteous God, right? That a God that is being, in which all things exist, something that is contingent upon which all things have found existence. So in the first sense given above, atheism is to be discriminated from pantheism. Pantheism denies the personality of God. Now, what's interesting is pantheism says that God is in the matter, right? That the world is God, that the trees, the rocks, the sand, everything is God. Now, here's the thing. If God is matter, right, what created the matter? Because matter is simply material. Matter cannot be immaterial. Matter cannot be spiritual. So pantheism is contradictory. Pantheism is incoherent from the word go, right? And it's also, so pantheism denies the personality of God. And also there's agnosticism, which denies the possibility of positive knowledge concerning him. So that's more of a neutral position. In the second sense, atheism includes both pantheism and agnosticism. So it states there's only in the material. And then it states that we can't know, except these guys are claiming knowledge. It's a knowledge position. Therefore, if it is a position of knowledge, if it's a claim of truth, then they must have evidence. And of course, they want to avoid providing evidence. So we've discussed some of that already. Okay? So notice practical indifference to and disregard of God. Now, there are implications to denying the lawgiver, the moral law of God. There are implications. If we have written documents that state, and doctrine that state that murder is wrong, where is the everlasting transcendent rule in atheism that states that murder is wrong? There is no such thing. So therefore murder cannot be wrong. Now they can give you their opinion, certainly, but there is nothing that is transcendent that states this. There's a lot to be said about that, but that's an argument I'll take up in a different set of slides in the future. Okay, now, ism dictionary. So this is actually called the ism dictionary. Atheism, lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. It contrasts with theism, exactly. If you did not have theism, you wouldn't have atheism. So atheism is a reaction to theism. It's the knee-jerk reaction against theism. The term applies both to those who assert that there are no gods and those who don't have any kind of belief regarding the existence of gods. Deduza, welcome. So you said I also bring so dry topics. I mean, very scholarly research. Well, yeah, I mean, look, my job previously was to research problems that would cause people to get killed, right? You have this property and you don't want people to jump over the fence and kill people or blow things up. So that just takes very specific, detailed thinking. It's like thinking like an engineer, right? I also happen to work in security. I worked as a bodyguard, worked in national defense. So I come at this from a very particular perspective, right? I don't come at this as necessarily a theologian. I look at this from a very clear analytical approach. This is what I'm trying to do. And also look at this in terms of ideological and psychological and propaganda warfare. These people are fighting a war. They are literally trying to erase one idea with their own. So they are fighting a war. These people are at war, and we have to recognize that. Now notice this is Welcome to the Dictionary of Isms, biggest online guide to words ending with ism. So here we've got those who assert that there are no gods. Now someone can say, well, I don't assert anything. Well, that's nice. You're speaking for yourself only. Right. Let's look at the Oxford and Merriam-Webster dictionaries. So the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy. Atheism is either the lack of belief that there exists a God or the belief that there exists none. Now, of course, really, all of these dictionaries, ultimately, at the end of the day, the implication is, and the stated view is, that atheism is the active rejection of the idea of God. Sometimes thought itself to be more dogmatic than mere agnosticism. More dogmatic. In other words, it is dogma, it is ideas you do not question. These are established ideas which are not questioned. This is like Islam. Now, of course, religions have dogma as well. For instance, we believe Jesus is the Son of God. We don't question that, right? We do believe we have reasons for this. Now, in Islam, if you question anything in Islam, you are committing blasphemy. You can be killed for this, right? In atheism, you'll be cancelled, right? So, but they do have, according to the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy, dogma. And that's the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy, 3rd edition, Simon Blackburn. What is dogma? Dogma is a fixed, especially religious belief or set of religious beliefs that people are expected to accept without any doubts. This exactly defines Islam in the Sharia. Ideas that must be accepted without doubt. That is literally in section A1.1 of the Sharia. In the Reliance of the Traveller, it is in the very opening pages of the Sharia law. Muslims must accept without doubt. So here you've got dogma. These are not free thinkers. They've accepted a given dogma. They cannot in their materialistic worldview, accept the idea that there is the material, that there is God. They have accepted this as doctrine, so therefore it is not merely a lack of belief. It's a rejection of anything that is beyond the material. Dogmatic. If you are dogmatic, you are certain that you are right and that everyone else is wrong. Do you guys think that that defines atheists? Ever had discussions with atheists? I mean, these people are in denial, and these people are arrogant, and yeah, this has been my experience of that. Yeah. So, any comments or questions? Please do let me know. All right, let's continue. Merriam-Webster, atheism. Atheism is a noun. The definition of atheism: a lack of belief or a strong disbelief in the existence of a god. Okay, a strong disbelief. A philosophical or religious position characterized by disbelief in the existence of a god or any gods. Okay, so is the Merriam-Webster dictionary lying? Is Oxford Dictionary or Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy lying? That it is a philosophical or religious position, a fixed, especially religious belief, thought to be more dogmatic than mere agnosticism. So yeah, archaic godlessness, especially in conduct. So atheists are known for being godless in their conduct. In other words, violating social norms, violating moral law. So notice a strong disbelief, not a lack. Okay, ungodliness, also wickedness. Remember, by the Christian definition, this would satisfy the definition of being satanic. It opposes the moral law of God. Welcome, Dragon. All right, let's continue. A Dictionary of Philosophy here by Thomas Maltner, and I believe this is the... So, atheism is the view that there is no divine being, no God. So, again, an active view that there is no God. Dictionary of Philosophy by Thomas Maltner, 1996. The World Book Encyclopedia, 1991. Atheism is the belief that God doesn't exist. So it's not a lack of belief, it's the active belief. Again. So thank you, Dragon, very much. Sergeant Grinch, you're 10 push-ups, man. Give me 10. Drop down, give me 10, and yeah, I'll pause. I'll wait for you for a moment. All right. All right, then let's go to the Encyclopedia of Philosophy by Paul Edwards, Editor-in-Chief, Volume 1, right? According to the most usual definition, an atheist is a person who maintains that there is no God. So someone who has come to the conclusion and thus argues for a particular position. Notice that it says here, this was I'm not sure if this was added by, if it's in the dictionary or added by the source that that was discussing this point that I was reading. It rejects eccentric definitions of the word. It simply says an atheist maintains that there is no God. This is someone who has drawn this conclusion. Daduza, what's up? I see you guys are laughing and yeah. So any thoughts on... All right, let's continue. Now, the Encyclopedia of Religion, 2nd edition. Atheism is the doctrine that God does not exist. Notice doctrine. This is doctrine, just like the Catholic Church has doctrine, the Anglican Church has doctrine, the Baptist Church has doctrine. Right? You're talking about a detailed set of written beliefs, a detailed set of principles upon which your belief is established, a detailed set of ideas that establish a particular worldview that clearly influences how you would view morality, how you'd view the law, so how you would view other people, how you would live your life. So again, doctrine, not simply a lack of belief, that God does not exist, that belief in the existence of God is a false belief. Interesting, now we're getting interesting. That belief in the existence of God is a false belief. This is a denial. Again, it's an active word, it's a verb. The word God here refers to a divine being regarded as the independent creator of the world, a being superlatively wise, powerful, and good. Encyclopedia of Religion, 1987. Now, why is it that we are not coming across academic references? Remember, I've got nearly 60 references here. Why is it that none of them state explicitly that, yeah, the only definition is a lack of belief? And then we can see that this is contradicted by major atheists, who all of them have a detailed set of beliefs, all of them going out of their way to say Christianity is false, all of them going out of their way to say that their ideas are better if they lack belief. Oh yeah, sorry, okay, yeah. Yeah, Grinch, just let me know if you did, just let me know how many push-ups you did, right? And then we'll continue. Okay, Funk and Wagnall's New Encyclopedia, Volume 1. Atheism denies the existence of deity. Okay, denial is an active verb. Let's have a look here at the Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics. Atheism, Greek and Roman. Atheism is a dogmatic creed. We're back to dogma. A belief that you do not question. You accept it without doubt. You accept it without question. A dogmatic creed consisting in the denial of every kind of supernatural power. Why? Because it is materialistic. Atheists are by definition materialists. They are by definition materialistic. And most of them are humanists. Right? So, yeah. So again, we're back to denial. Thank you very much. I'm a warrior. Appreciate that. All right. So now, atheism has not often been seriously maintained at any period of civilized thought. Very interesting that they state this in the Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, Volume 2. So again, I haven't gone into depth on this. I believe I have a copy of this. I did find a copy somewhere, but I haven't read into all of these. I was just collecting I did 11, a free one for you. It's fantastic. And think of this as a way of improving your health while we're improving your mental knowledge. Yeah, I was at gym today, man. Good grief. I had a heavy session on Friday myself, and then saw my trainer today. It was, yeah, and it's like -4 degrees outside. Let's have a look. What is the weather? It's -3 degrees right now, apparently, but yeah, it's snowing. So yeah, we're dealing with deep snow here, and okay, let me continue. Now, back to Ernest Nagel. We've covered this before. I jumped ahead previously. Atheist religious thoughts. Now, this is Ernest Nagel. Now, of course, atheists and other idiots are going to go, well, he's a Jew. Well, he was one of 20 authors in this book. So the fact that he's a Jew, he's not even the editor. That's edited by Peter A. Angeles. So look, let me just be very blunt to anyone who may be listening who's going to go, well, yeah, it's because a Jew said it. I will ban you. Simple. I'll ban you just outright. I'm not even going to engage with you if those are your views. So this book is called Critiques of God, Making the Case Against Belief in God. Now, atheism is a lack of belief, yet these 20 top academics were all making the case against belief in God because they have a lack of belief. They simply have no beliefs. They don't think about this at all, but they're writing a book that will explain their arguments for how they don't have any arguments, how they're taking a position about how they don't have a position. So either they're hypocrites or they're lay atheists, or all misleading us, all of them gaslighting us. Another copy of the book has this statement, the major statement of the case against belief in God. So the subheading in a different copy of this has this subheading. Okay, a statement of the case against belief in God. So these guys are putting forward arguments. So now, why is it that these major academics do not know that atheism is merely a lack of belief? And of course, you've got John Dewey. This is the guy that founded the American educational system and has been pushing his atheist ideas into schools for more than a century, and of course has been pushing Christianity out of schools for much more than a century. Anthony Flew, he became an ex-atheist. He and Richard Dawkins accused him of apostasy. Richard Dawkins accused. So Anthony Flew was a major academic. He was a major physicist, I believe, and he eventually turned around and said, there must have been a God that created the universe and created the world. Looking at the complexity, this could not have been a random cosmic accident. So he basically walked away from atheism and of course became persona non grata. That he died in 2010, but he was a major academic figure. Of course, he was one of the guys in the 1970s, I believe 76, he wrote a book, and the argument for atheism, I believe it was called, and he of course was trying to promote the idea that atheism is merely a lack of belief. Now again, this of course is going to be hypocritical of him. If he believes that atheism is merely a lack of belief, why is he writing a whole chapter in this book with arguments explaining exactly how Christianity is wrong and atheism is right, if atheism is merely a lack of belief? Yaya says, I often ask atheists if they believe in the resurrection of Jesus. When they start making fun of it, I tell them that man today can revive people, so maybe they start thinking, okay, yeah. yeah, he apostatized. Yeah, that's how he died. Okay, right, so let's continue here. So a few quotes out of the book. I must begin by stating what sense I'm attaching to the word atheism, a critique and a denial of the major claims of all varieties of theism. Now, don't forget, Karl Marx did write, as well as Lenin, Stalin, and Engels, all of them in different ways, but Marx most specifically did state that the beginning of criticism is the criticism of religion. So he's just following in the words of Karl Marx here. He's just doing what good old Karl Marx did. So a critique and a denial of the major claims of all varieties of theism. We know that these guys aren't going to be writing about Buddhism. They're not going to be writing about Jainism. They're going to be talking about Christianity here. Several things immediately follow. There are implications from these definitions. In the first place, atheism is not necessarily an irreligious concept. Oh, it's a religious concept. Theism is one among many views concerning the nature and origin of the world. Now, I've had atheists swear at me, literally, for saying that atheism is a worldview. And here we've got this highly qualified academic, highly qualified logician and mathematician telling us that atheism is a worldview and not necessarily an irreligious worldview. Right. Now, the denial of theism is logically compatible with the religious outlook. So, being atheistic and denying theism is compatible with the religious outlook upon life and is in fact characteristic of some of the great historical religions. Thank you very much for that, Ernst Nagel, pointing that out. Early Buddhism is a religion which does not subscribe to any doctrine about a god. Don't forget, Buddha was an atheist. And of course, his followers worshipped him as a god. So yeah. And there are pantheistic religions and philosophies which, because they deny that God is a being separate from and independent of the world, are not theistic in the sense above. As I mentioned, pantheism believes that God is in the matter. God is the matter. That the matter is God. Right? The question is, how did the matter create itself? Right? Because that means that God would be being created within the matter. So matter is contingent upon creation. So this doesn't explain how this is now transcendent. This still just leaves that question open. Buddha was a Hindu Brahmin. Yeah, but of course, now he was eventually an atheist. He didn't believe in God. Well, a God. He just believed that life is suffering. We just got to be able to chill about it. And, so whatever he might have been. But, yeah, let's continue. So he says, atheism is not to be identified with sheer unbelief. Very interesting. He tells us, do not identify atheism with sheer unbelief. It's not simply a lack of belief or with disbelief in some particular creed of a religious group. Right? He says a child who has not received religious instruction and has never heard about God is not an atheist, for he is not denying any theistic claims. So here, atheists must have arguments, reasons for rejecting theistic claims, for rejecting religion. All right, that's Ernst Nagel. Of course, now he is contradicted by the good old Baron de Holbach, who had this original definition of atheism was just a lack of belief. But notice, just like Muslims say, everyone is born a Muslim. Well, according to him, everyone is born an atheist. Baron de Holbach wrote the first openly atheistic book, The System of Nature, in 1770. And from his own writings, he defined atheism in this way. He wrote in his book, Good Sense, in 1772, all children are atheists. They have no idea of God. Of course, the idea of children who have not been exposed to theism being by definition atheists follows from our definition of an atheist as someone without a belief in God. Now you have two contradictory beliefs. Now, atheism is very open to contradictions because it does not have the idea of non-contradictory logic, right? So understand, logic has three basic pillars, right? There are three basic laws of logic. So the first of those is that P is P, something is something. A man is a man. John is John, right? The mouse is a mouse. The mouse is not an elephant. The mouse is not a kettle, right? And P is P and P is not Q, right? So a man is a man. A woman is a woman. A woman is not a man, except, of course, we have atheists today very keen on telling us that a man can be a woman. See, this is a violation of logic. So this is unfortunately the reasonable atheists who are trampling on logic that they claim to be fully embracing, that they are the people of reason, but yet they are fully violating all aspects of logic here. At the age of 42, left and went to the forest to attain salvation and liberation, and then I think Buddha, philosophy of enlightenment, where man can attain. Yeah, there's a folklore. So yeah, let's see. A man can be a woman, and a woman can tell you what a woman is and what is a cat. Yeah, it's all, look, I mean, it's just a violation of logic. So it's simply the celebration of the fact that you can be your own God, you can make up your own rules, you can make up your own ideas. So really, it's irrational. Atheism is irrational. It's utterly irrational. Right, let's continue. So, indifference is not equal to atheism. So indifference is not atheism. So back to the same book. In the case of an adult, if he has withdrawn from the faith of his fathers without reflection, or because of frank indifference to any theological issue, he is also not an atheist. So in other words, he doesn't just have a lack of belief, a vague, unthinking idea. He has actually thought about this. Such an adult is not challenging theism and is not professing any views on the subject. So now you've got these academics that are telling us in more detail that atheism is an active rejection of theistic ideas, specifically Christian ideas, and they are adopting atheism as their worldview. Now, Ernest Nagel is a professor of philosophy at Columbia, or was professor of philosophy at Columbia. He was the editor of several journals. In other words, he was very, very well versed in the subject of philosophy. So he was editor of the Journal of Philosophy, the Journal of Symbolic Logic, and the Journal of Philosophy of Science. He wrote several books, amongst others, An Introduction to Logic and the Scientific Method, Sovereign Reason, Logic Without Metaphysics and the Structure of Science, and the Theory of Probability. So I'd say the guy is fairly educated. Now, of course, every single lay atheist just simply rejects anything that these academics or these other sources put forward and go, well, you have to believe me. Now, if we have to believe every single atheist who are going to give us some random contradictory set of ideas, there can be no objective truth in what they're stating. It means that, now, don't forget this idea that we have to believe them because their word is true, because it's true for them. This is, again, we're going back to 6th century BC Greece, to pagan Greece, to the pagans. And we're going back specifically again to Protagoras. We're going back to the sophists who invented very sophisticated forms of lying. Aristotle, Pythagoras, even Plato vehemently detested the sophists. They called them liars because sophist, the term sophist is a pejorative. It's an insult. Someone who's a sophist is someone who's a professional liar. Aristotle took great exception to the sophists for being liars, right? So now what happens is we have to accept his truth. There's no objective truth. Now, if they have no objective truth, why would we want to consider anything they say to be truthful if truth is subjective? Why is my truth? Of course, they'll tell you that their truth is greater and better than your truth, but there is no objective truth. So this, again, is incoherent. It is utterly stupid. So, yeah, reason to simply reject atheism on those grounds. Mary Alex, very, very welcome. My ancestors, well, all our ancestors were probably pagan at some point, right? So a lack of thought, no reason. Again, so atheism is the absence of a belief in God, nothing more. According to George H. Smith, this dopey-looking guy, if the theist wishes to draw monumental implications from this lack of belief, he must argue for his claims. Now, if atheism is just a lack of belief, well, then they've got nothing to prove, right? They've got nothing to take responsibility for. So this is simply sophist word games. Now, of course, this is his view, but then again, we have so many others who have very clearly, and all the academic definitions do not take this claim on board. These 50 plus academic resources, and someone said, well, how do I know your resources are any good? Well, what other resources are there? I didn't go to some sort of Mickey Mouse definition. I went to the top academic journals in the world. Yale, Princeton, all these other universities, right? Where was I supposed to go? I simply took the very best definitions. None of them support this Mickey Mouse claim that it's just a lack of belief, right? If you've done literally no thinking about something, you have a psychological void, then what are you even talking about? Why are you even having a conversation? If you have a complete and utter psychological void, a complete lack of any ideas, nothing in the way of anything approaching a coherent thought on the topic. Yet, then we need to ask, okay, so that's fine for you. You're a complete baby. You were just born 3 minutes ago. But what about guys like Richard Dawkins? Don't they know that atheism is a lack of belief? Because they simply don't argue on that basis. The entire world civilization used to worship Hindu deities. I mean, look, I wouldn't necessarily state that. So, okay, so atheism. He wrote a book here. Now, notice, he says that atheism is just the absence of belief. Okay, it's just the absence. It's this void, the psychological void, a vacuum in your brain. Except he writes here a book called The Case Against God. So if it's just a lack of belief and they make no arguments, how is he writing a book called The Case Against God? Again, that would be simply hypocrisy. That is simply a contradiction. So the historic use of atheism has meant the use of evaluation and reason in the rejection of theism. Atheists traditionally followed the literal meaning. It is a rejection of theism, right? Based on their own ideas. they've decided to argue God away, right? Explain him away. So the earliest source known that slightly resembles modern usage is by Charles Bradlaugh, an agnostic. Oddly enough, an agnostic. Atheists hate being called agnostics or wanting to be agnostics. They will define themselves in a way that makes them out explicitly to be an agnostic, and they will refuse that title. And they want to make the word atheist into something else. Why? Because they always have to redefine everything. So the atheist does not say there is no God, according to Charles Bradlaugh, this agnostic. The atheist does not say there is no God, but he says, I know not what you mean by God. The word God is to me a sound conveying no clear or distinct affirmation. And he wrote that in a book called A Plea for Atheism in 1864. So now this word means nothing to me. I don't have any idea. I don't have any concept of what this is. Now, if there is no orthodoxy, right? If atheism has no orthodoxy, how is John Q Atheist to be taken seriously? How is anyone to be taken seriously? And so then how do we say who has authority here? Where is the orthodoxy? Who has the authority? So this is simply a way for them to dodge responsibility. It's a collective method, a collective game they play, so that no one of them can be pointed at, right? But of course, all of the academic sources, and when you look at those academics who sat down, thought about it, and decided what is atheism, they all tell us it is an active set of beliefs that actively, based on their own thinking, rejects theism, rejects God, rejects Christianity specifically, and has now put forward a new set of beliefs that they believe is superior. Now, modern usage began in 1979. So now notice this historic use of atheism is the use of evaluation and reason in the rejection of theism, right? So modern usage began in 1979. Modern atheism is not very old, right? It only goes back to about the late 1700s. It first appeared in Atheism, the Case Against God by George H. Smith. So this lack of thought, right? No reasons whatsoever, just this blank space. So it's the Secular Web Top 10 Atheist book, and he says atheism, therefore, is the absence of theistic belief in its main form. It is not belief, it is the absence of belief. Now, of course, this is when this started, because they realized their position is very weak, they struggle to make arguments, and therefore they had to find a way out of the need to present beliefs. So let's see here. When it comes to Nobel Prizes, they're happy to join hands with agnostics to get 10%. In fact, atheists have 5% Nobel Prize, most of them in literature. Man can be woman, yeah, of course. That's what atheists believe. That's what atheists tell us, right? I mean, drag queen story hour. Who's pushing that? Atheists? Want to bet? Right. So George H. Smith does tell us why he wants to push this particular definition. If one presents a positive belief, i.e. an assertion which one claims to be true, then one has the obligation to present evidence in its favor. The burden of proof lies with the person who asserts the truth of a position. If the evidence is not forthcoming, if there are not sufficient grounds for accepting the proposition, it should not be believed. So he tells us this is why atheists don't want to make an assertion. They don't want to put forward a proposition. That's why they want to pretend that their position is a non-position, that their belief is a non-belief. So atheism is really the belief that your beliefs are not a belief. That's really what it is. I'm a warrior. Look, we're not here to discuss the fact that all gods were Hindu gods and that the Hindus were the first people and that everybody worshipped the Hindus. This is not that stream. This is not that discussion. All right. This is not your opportunity to push your particular ideas on that issue. Right. Now, the oldest temple known in the world as well. So let's go to Göbekli Tepe, which is the oldest known temple. In fact, there's probably one or two known now that are older than that. Those are not Hindu temples, just so by the way. Okay, that goes way back. This goes back well before these Hindu ideas. All right. So yeah, hopefully this is making a point here. So let me see. So yeah, sorry, I haven't finished the slide, so I'm going to skip over this slide. I'll come back to this at another time. Okay, and so here we've got this idea, the new religion, a Hegelian dialectic. This is from the American Philosophical Association. And this is a 2018 paper, right, which they delivered at a seminar, at a conference. And it says here, from atheism from Majid Amini, okay, at Virginia State University. Traditionally, atheism has been conceived and construed as a rejection of religion and religious faith. It has always been this way throughout history, until the 80s when they decided, oh, this is not working for us. We have to pretend that we don't have. Okay, so I'm a warrior. How about we don't worry about those idiotic things and you just focus on the presentation, all right? To do so, let's just also get back on track if you don't mind. All right. So now, in his Bampton lectures at Columbia University under the title of Religion, Atheism and Faith, Paul Ricoeur offers an interpretation of atheist reminiscent of Hegelian dialectical approach, whereby atheism as an antithesis to religion paves the way for synthesis. So, briefly speaking, Marx was huge into this Hegelian philosophy, this Hegelian dialectic. Marx, Lenin, all the communists were into this. In fact, it's part of its foundation within their communist philosophy, that you had this primitive set of ideas, this primitive ideology, and over time, man develops from this primitive state, right? He develops organized religion, which is the next state, but it's still primitive. It's still like an early stage. And then over time, he develops greater knowledge. His scientific knowledge develops. So in other words, there's no transcendent morals. There's no permanent transcendent moral values, right? He then develops greater knowledge, and lo and behold, he develops socialism. So organized religion. And each time one phase bumps up against another phase, there is a violent clash. You have this violent clash. So you have the primitive cultures, organized religion, you have this primitive violent clash, and bang, the new paradigm takes over. Then religion, organized religion, bumps into socialism, you have this violent clash, and then socialism takes over, because that's the next step up. This is how you have this development, right? This is how progressives, because they're progressives, because this is how civilization progresses. So the next phase after organized religion, because you must get rid of Christianity now to bring socialism. Socialism will then eventually lead us to the nirvana, to paradise, will lead us to heaven. This will be the utopia of communism. So eventually, socialism will give way to communism. So you'll have the revolution, which brings us communism. So this is how the dialectic works, right? So they speak here of this synthesis, namely a new articulation of faith. So atheism becomes a new articulation of faith in the Hegelian dialectic, and socialism, communism are explicitly atheist, but they steal from within the doctrine of the church to develop their ideas. And the purpose of this paper is to appraise Ricoeur's rendition of the religious significance of atheism against these problematic concepts of religion and atheism. So religious significance of atheism, it's very much a religious worldview. And we've already mentioned that the original Marxist, the Communist Manifesto was originally called the Communist Confession of Faith, which was based on the Catholic Catechism, the Confession of Faith. All right. Lydia, you said we are seeing this exact thing. What is that you're seeing? So I'll start winding down. Now the term atheist, now we're going to go to Professor Matt McCormick, Department of Philosophy, California State University, Sacramento. And this is in Oxford Bibliographies, okay? And they state here that your best research starts here at Oxford Bibliographies. We're looking at this professor and the term atheist, okay? Let's see what he has to say. This guy who is professor, who the Oxford Bibliographies state is someone that we should watch, someone who's a person in authority and knowledge. The effects of the atheist agendas, yes. Yeah, atheists will say even the church preaches socialism, because socialists, remember, socialism was originally titled Christian socialism. It was originally a ripoff of the Catholic Church, right? They try to rip off the Catholic Church and then develop a scientific religion. Just like you can say that Islam ripped off the Talmud, Islam ripped off Christianity and the Bible, and was going to develop a better religion. Okay, so it's this pagan idea that simply camouflages itself with Gnosticism, Judaism, and Christianity, and goes, okay, here we've got a new thing. Right? It's exactly the same thing. It's just a ripoff of. Now, he says here, now notice, within his course, he teaches a course on atheism, and they have a syllabus. Now, this is his 2012 prospectus on this, right? Philosophy 192A, Section 1, Professor Matt McCormick. His office hours, and his blah, blah, blah. And catalog description, seminar. So it's a course that he teaches on atheism. Atheism, arguments, objections, and responses. Oh, so he teaches, it's not just a lack of belief, just born like a baby, blank mind. It's not just a blank mind. He teaches what it is, so it's defined What are the arguments for atheism? What are the objections against atheism? And what are the responses you give? It examines the arguments, the concepts, the objections and responses surrounding philosophical atheism. It addresses atheism in the context of at least four of the following: evil, miracles, historical evidence for theism, faith, divine hiddenness, theodicies, divine attributes, science, morality, the meaning of life, agnosticism, and naturalized accounts of belief. Now that seems a lot like this is a doctrine, an anti-doctrine, a counter-doctrine to Christian doctrine, a counter-doctrine to theistic beliefs. It is not just a lack of belief, just this empty brain, this empty mind like a baby. Notice they are teaching an entire course on how to be an atheist. If it's just a lack of belief, don't believe anything, I don't know anything, I just don't have any positions, then why are they teaching an entire university course on this? Someone needs to go back and tell this guy you're doing atheism wrong. It's just a lack of belief. Yeah, everyone is born atheist, everyone is born Muslim, but you need to choose Christ, and that's fair enough. Okay, so yeah, we'll finish here. Okay, required texts. What books do you need? The Improbability of God, a book that argues for the improbability of God, because atheism is just a lack of belief. Again, hypocrites, contradictions abound. Atheism is just psychobabble. Science and Religion, Are They Compatible? By Daniel Dennett. Oh my God, and Alvin Plantinga, Oxford University Press, recommended The Impossibility of a God. Not just the improbability, but now the book The Impossibility of a God, and the Cambridge Companion to Atheism by Michael Martin. Oh boy, by Michael Martin. Okay, so notice there are books here. So he's recommending this. So someone didn't tell him that atheism is just a lack of belief. Let me read this page and I will finish here. Okay. The term atheist. An atheist does not believe that God or a divine being exists. So he says, this guy gets right off the bat, this professor of atheism who teaches a course on atheism, how to defend your atheism, which is like apologetics for atheism, right? He says it's a belief that God does not exist. The all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving creator of the universe does not exist. It is widely accepted that to be an atheist is to deny that a God or gods exist. Theism and atheism are primarily positions about what sort of things exist. Atheists take the view that there is sufficient evidence to justify concluding that there is no God. So once again, we're back to the point where this is just not a lack of belief. This is people who have developed a set of ideas, a doctrine. This is the worldview that they have decided is true because they've come to these conclusions. He tells us here, agnosticism is a category, an epistemological category. So it's a category of truth. It describes someone who is not sure whether there is a God or not. Typically, the agnostic has the view that there is sufficient available evidence to draw a reasonable conclusion one way or the other. Sorry, that there's insufficient available evidence to draw a conclusion one way or the other. And thus the responsible attitude is to suspend judgment. Now the atheist says, I haven't thought about it. He's an agnostic because he's suspended judgment. If he is being honest, if what they say is true, right, then they are just an agnostic, but they will deny being an agnostic. An agnostic is someone who actively rejects God, and they also were atheists, so we actively reject God. But you say, but if you don't have a belief, you just are an agnostic. You haven't made up your mind. You don't know if there's evidence. But they'll say, no, I'm not an agnostic, and they will insist on being an atheist. So someone's lying here. Okay. She says, yes, in an upcoming debate, Catholic versus Protestant, some dude wrote, I am for an LGBT-friendly Bible. Please change it back. Well, yeah, there's a lot of that going around these days. Yeah, so yes, Daduza, it is a belief of a lack of a belief in a belief. Exactly. It's just, it's designed to it's designed to confuse you with gobbledygook. Now he says here, authors in the past have offered criticisms of believing or argued against the existence of God. And he says, atheism as we know it is a relatively recent development. As I've stated over and over, and you'll see this, we opened up this talk with that particular quote, that it goes back to the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. It goes back to the late 1700s. So atheism is a relatively recent development. Now, of course, I've seen atheists pushing, well, 200,000 years ago, mankind had no gods. Mankind didn't have gods. Mankind was blank. And then theism came later. Absolute trash. Complete crap. Okay? All of the oldest cave writings, all of it has discussions of deities or some kind of worship of deities. The oldest building in the world is a freaking temple. The oldest known building on Earth is a temple. The oldest known surviving relics on Earth are temples. So people began to consider the possibility of a fully viable alternative to theism after Darwin. That's fascinating. So they developed a fully viable doctrine after Darwin, and the practice of giving a direct philosophical argument for the non-existence of God became common even later. Now that's fascinating. Someone needs to tell this guy that he's doing atheism wrong. Okay, so I will pause here. I will stop here, and hopefully this has been interesting to understand the... Okay, but well, hopefully it's given you a lot of information to understand that atheists are either deliberately gaslighting you, or they are utterly, utterly clueless about the history and academic definitions of their faith. Because too often they're discussing this is a complete doctrine, it is a religious faith, it is a worldview, it functions as religion, even if it is not substantively a religion. It functions in the sense of religion, even if it does not have its own God. Of course, as we've seen in other episodes, that atheists believe themselves to be the highest of creation, therefore they are God. And I've seen atheists actively call themselves, we are God, I am God, we are the gods. Clate the JW, so maybe it's both, yeah, clueless as well as arrogant. Yeah, look, it's a contradiction. It's a contradiction. It's all over the place. So yeah, hopefully to refrain from thinking about this issue is also a choice. So Random Joe is still culpable, and that is true. To not think about an issue is a decision, and they've made the decision to not think about it. Therefore, they are technically an agnostic, but they will not accept the definition of agnostic. They're atheists, which means that deep down, and they know this, okay, it's not even that deep down, they are rejecting God. They don't want to accept the idea of God. They want to have this theistic, materialistic worldview. It is a rebellion. Lydia would have to agree. It is a rebellion against God. And yeah. And then he never returned as a horse says, I would bet on the side of gaslighting with the higher echelons included for the foot soldiers. Agreed, but some of them are clearly trained. If this guy is teaching courses, right? If this guy is teaching courses on how to be an atheist, the arguments to use, the counter arguments, if he's teaching this stuff, right, how to deal with different aspects of it, morality, the meaning of life, and so on, then they are being trained. That means thousands and thousands of these students are coming out of universities every year, pushing these ideas, and we're seeing these ideas. The idea that men can be women, this is coming from atheists, right? This whole, the whole crazy alphabet stuff, the whole rainbow nonsense, that's atheistic, right? It's completely irrational. But again, these are also pagan beliefs. These are pagan beliefs because don't forget, they are sophists. They believe that what is true for me is true for me. There's no objective truth. So yeah, you're dealing with paganism. Once again, welcome to paganism. This was the world of paganism 2,600 years ago, and this is what they've based their beliefs on. So guys, I will call it a night here. I hope that was enlightening. I hope that was interesting and useful. Thank you very much for the donation earlier. I do appreciate it. So I will do a stream again this week, if not Wednesday, probably on Friday, but I look forward to seeing you guys again. We'll continue this. Frank the Larger says gaslighting is a thing these days. Reprobate minds. They call good evil and evil good, and they believe it. They are evil, immoral, self-indulgent, haughty, and arrogant. Yes, there's definitely a case to be made there. No objective truth, relativism. We're repeating things of old all over again, and people think this is new. Exactly. This is exactly what went on under paganism. It's not new. All of these ideas that when you read the words of the new atheists, it's really shoddy. It's really bad. It's a really bad representation of what the guys were saying at the time of the Enlightenment. It's a rehash, but a very poor rehash of Enlightenment nonsense ideas. And he never returned his horse. Send your resume to Elon. He needs good men around him. I wish, man. I would love to. Yeah, man. Wow. Yeah, if anyone knows of work in national defense, border security, critical national infrastructure protection, of opportunities, let me know. I'd be happy to go back into my old field. I do miss that. So long-range wide area security systems designed based on, ground radar and thermal cameras, those kinds of sensors. Thank you, Lydia. So thank you, guys. Have a good night, and I will see you soon. Adam Leuchter, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Take care, guys. Good night.